About 22 years ago, my then-girlfriend and I were on a nowhere-in-particular-to-go road trip. I think we were somewhere in Nebraska. It was one of those states that seems to be about 90% corn. We stopped somewhere for the night, at this little podunk motel that had only 5 or 6 rooms available because we were tired and needed to stop. We'd been driving for almost 2 days, switching back and forth, mostly not stopping. It was late when we went in and GF started walking towards the reception room. She stopped and called out for me to come with her. I was looking around at the sketchy fall-down place. There's a dude at the desk inside, and he is huge, terrifyingly so. I'm no slouch in the big guy department either. This guy towered over me by about 10 or 12 inches, which would have made him at least 7 feet tall, and probably had 100 to 150 pounds on me, and he looked like he was extruded from some sort of tree. So we walk in, and ask for a room. The guy smiles, nods, writes some things on the desk, takes my cash, hands us a key. There are TVs on the desk, 4 or 5 of them, like stereotypical CCTV displays from the 80s. I look down and notice only one screen, because it is pornographic. More on this. The guy is wearing jogging pants, and clearly has an erection. I take the key and we go outside. GF is short, and didn't see over the desk, so didn't see the porn. The porn was weird. I think it was of questionable legality. There were a number of youngish women, who looked about mid-teen in years, working out in a gymnasium, nude. They were vaguely robotic looking, as if they were acting badly. I took in only about 8 to 10 seconds of the porn, but the images have stuck with me over the years. We were both very, very creeped out when we discussed this in our room. I leaned our, very large, suitcases up against the door, and put a vase on the suitcases so that if the door were to open, the vase would fall. I also rigged the windows with some plastic cups so that if the windows opened, the cups would squish and make some noise. GF and I both showered, then we conked out on the bed, about 11:45. 3:30 a.m. I wake up. I'm groggy, don't really know what is happening. Just feel weird. I decide to go grab a drink and get some ice from the foyer. Big dude is not around. I decide to look over at the CCTVs on the desk, see what's what, because they're still on. The one screen still has the same porn. One screen is showing surveillance from the parking lot. One screen is showing surveillance from inside our room. GF is fast asleep on the bed. I leave, go pack up the car quick, pick up GF and put her in the car, still asleep, and get the fuck out of there. Visitor in a desert, wanted to rest somewhere but he couldn't see anything but sand. As he was walking at night, he saw a hotel. It had 10 rooms or something and only 2 floors. He decided to ask for a room. He got in and asked if there was a room available. The employer told him that there is a room but no one wants to go there, not even the staff, because the next room is haunted. The visitor, as he didn't believe in ghosts and demons, said it wouldn't be a problem to sleep there, so he got the key and went to his room to rest. It was 3 a.m. and the visitor was sleeping. Suddenly, some weird and paranormal voices woke him up. He got worried. Not because he was scared, but because he worried about what happened to the person that was screaming. The voices and screams were coming from the room next to him. He fell asleep again, but then, he heard someone knocking in the wall. It was coming from the room next to him again. He was sure it was a prank and someone wanted to scare him. He got up from his bed, he got out of his room and knocked the door of the room next to him. No one answered, so he decided to see if there was anyone there from the lock. He looked inside the lock and saw a woman with black hair and a white dress. He could only see her back, her face was turned in the window. He got angry and thought that some kids were messing with him. He went back to his room when some voices were heard from the room next to him again. He was so angry. He got up again, got out of his room and looked through the lock. The only thing he saw then, it was a red thing. He didn't know what this thing was, but he went back to his room. He didn't hear any screams or voices for the rest of the night. The next morning, he woke up and got down to the hall. He asked what all these screams and voices were. The employer told him that nothing screamed that night. The visitor said that some screams, knocks in the walls and voices were heard from the room next to him. The employer looked at him with a face full of fear. He told him the story of that room. There was a woman that lived there. She had black hair and wore a white dress. She was really beautiful. But one night, she got raped. The date was 15th of July, 1997. But wait, said the visitor. Today is 15th of July, 2017, he started getting scared. The employer told him that her rapist was so cruel with her. He killed her. He stabbed her 666 times. The last 2 times in the eyes. They started bleeding, and when we found her she had red eyes. Wait, what? I saw something red yesterday through the lock, said the visitor. A few years ago I spent several weeks working in Fort Worth, Texas. Since I was paying all my own expenses, I stayed in a rather low-end suite hotel. It was so low-end that a number of the residents were permanent or semi-permanent. But the price and location were what I needed. My next-door neighbors were a young couple with a baby and a toddler. Sometimes another young man would stay with them. One day I was doing paperwork in my room when the aforementioned young man started pounding on the neighbor's door demanding to be let in to get his stuff. Getting no response, he went to the office and demanded that the manager let him into the room to get his stuff. The manager came up, knocked on the door and, getting no response, told the young man there was nothing she could do. He became more agitated in his demand, saying that he lived there and she had to let him in or there would be consequences. She reminded him that his name was not on the paperwork, so he had no right to be let into the room. Then she called the police to get him to leave. He told the responding officer that his stuff was in the room along with the 2 children who may be unattended. So, the officer asked the manager to open the door. The young couple were passed out, presumably under the influence of drugs. That's why they did not answer the door. The children were okay. The officer called for children's services to come get them. The place was a mess with very little food, mostly snack food and sodas. The toilet had been removed and set aside. The officer said that was a common thing for drug users/dealers. It makes it easy to dispose of illegal drugs quickly if the police show up. Just drop them down the pipe. So you're wondering what was the stuff that the young man just had to have. Work boots that he needed for his job. A medium-sized plastic bag that looked like it might have clothing and other miscellaneous items in it. And a 2-gallon gas can. That's what bothered me the most. A gas can in a hotel room with 2 small children just seems like a very bad idea. So mine takes place in a London hostel a few weeks ago. I have 2 friends with me that are both male, and we're staying in a 9-bed mixed dorm. There's 3 sets of 3-tier bunk beds. I'm in the bottom bed of the right bunk, friend 1 in the top of my bunk, friend 2 in bottom bed of middle bunk. So, we get in at 2 a.m. and all just quietly get in our beds. After a few minutes of lying there trying to sleep, I hear rustling behind me. I'm lying on my side facing the wall. So I think it is just someone going through their bag and ignore. Then I feel a hand on my hip over the cover. I turn round and it's a random guy telling me to move over and trying to pull at my cover. I initially thought he was drunk and wasn't sure which bed to be in, so I tell him to go find his own bed, and then he shuffles away to bottom bed of left bunk. Then he comes back again, I again tell him to go back to his own bed and he shuffles back to his own again. This happens another couple of times, with me gradually speaking louder and getting less polite, telling him to fuck off. So I'm shaking cause the situation is making me nervous, and message my mate that's on the top bunk, saying I don't think I'm going to be able to sleep that night. He messages back casually thinking it's cause of someone snoring. This is when I find out both my mates have earplugs in, and although they've heard me speaking, they each thought I was speaking to the other friend. So I tell him the situation and he starts keeping an eye out. I hear the guy go to the bathroom that is en suite, but I can tell from the light he left the bathroom door open whilst doing so and refused to look. My mate fills me in that the guy was walking round with his pants down and deliberately left the door open to get me to look, but either way the guy goes back to his bed after and we think the situation is finally over. Then it happens again, my mate keeping an eye out shines his phone light on the floor and shouts for the guy to fuck off. Apparently he was crawling across the floor again towards me. The guy suddenly takes offense at my mate's light shining on him and starts actually climbing the bunk ladder like King Kong to get to my mate on the top and was trying to take his phone. They wrestled for a while with my mate actually kicking the guy in the neck to try and keep him away, only for the guy to swing backwards and come straight back at him again. I use this time to run for security, who find the guy still hanging on the bed when they get there, then call the police and have the guy taken away in a riot van and banned from the building. Whilst the police had dragged him outside waiting for the riot van, the guy even had butted the brick wall several times. No idea what that guy was on cause it wasn't alcohol, but definitely on something to take a kick to the neck and still act like nothing happened afterwards. The guy kept trying to blame my mate when security came as well, saying things in broken English like, "Come up here and see how violent this guy is." My other mate that had slept through the whole incident kept saying the next day that he couldn't believe how friendly everyone in London is. In a quiet, foggy town deep in the Appalachian Mountains, there was an old hotel called the Whispering Pines. Its worn-out front stood tall against the backdrop of tall pine trees that whispered eerily in the wind, giving the hotel its spooky. Few people dared to go inside because stories of people disappearing and seeing ghosts had scared everyone for many years. One stormy autumn night, Sarah and Mark, a young couple looking for a place to stay out of the rain, found the Whispering Pines. They ignored the warnings and decided to stay there. Inside, the hotel was like a maze with dark hallways lit by dim lights, and the walls were covered in old wallpaper that was peeling. The air smelled musty and old. As they settled into their room, they felt uneasy. Weird whispers seemed to come from the walls, and shadows moved in the corners of their eyes. Sarah thought it was just nerves, but Mark felt like they were being watched. That night, while the storm raged outside, they suddenly heard a chilling sound, a child's laughter echoing down the hallway. Mark, scared but curious, took a flashlight and went to see what it was, leaving Sarah trembling in bed. The hallway seemed endless, with doors on each side, and the laughter sounded like it was just around the corner. When Mark turned the corner, the laughter stopped suddenly. He found an old staircase going up to the attic. Even though he felt like he should turn back, he went up the stairs. Each step made the air colder. In the attic, with his flashlight flickering, Mark found an old trunk covered in dust and cobwebs. He opened it with shaking hands and saw yellowed pictures of children with empty eyes. Each picture was from October 31st, 1923. Before he could understand what it meant, he heard a bone-chilling scream. Mark turned around and saw a ghostly girl in a torn white dress. Her eyes were black holes. He was frozen with fear and almost fell down the stairs trying to get away. Meanwhile, in the room, Sarah was terrified. It felt like the walls were closing in, and she heard whispers that sounded mean. She covered her ears, trying to make them stop, but they got louder. Downstairs, the old caretaker sat in his rocking chair by the fire. He mumbled to himself, lost in memories from a long time ago. No one knew how long he'd been there, taking care of the Whispering Pines. At dawn, Sarah and Mark ran away from the Whispering Pines, still scared from what they saw. They promised never to talk about that night again, but they couldn't forget it. Years later, when the town decided to tear down the Whispering Pines, they found children's bones under the hotel. The kids looked just like the ones in the pictures Mark found, a sad reminder of something bad that happened long ago. Now, where the Whispering Pines used to be, there's nothing but empty land. People in town talk quietly about the hotel's scary past and warn others to stay away from the cursed place where the whispers of the past still linger.